Hello all, I'm your host Young Falcon and welcome to my Doom Eternal review. This is going to be a look at the pros and cons of everything involved with the game and if you should pick it up with your hard-earned cash, especially with everything going on. A lot of people are going to be indoors a lot more, so maybe this might be a good pickup for you to play over this spring quarantine. With that all out of the way, let's delve into, unfortunately, the cons first. Now thankfully the reason why we're delving into the cons first is because there's honestly not those many. There's just one minor / major gripe I have with the game, and it is the storyline. Major because I found it really disjointed and doesn't flow well. It just felt so boring. Like, nothing about it was really hitting for me. There's a lot of codex entries and calls you have to read up on, and listening to audio and dialogue and all that kind of stuff, and in a game as fast-paced as Doom, where you're literally constantly on the move every like 6 seconds, with a storyline that's trying to take itself extremely seriously, as you have arcade one-ups and toys you pick up in the overworld and like squeak and all this crazy cute stuff and all cool like cartoony sound effects when you're shooting off demons' heads and things. You know, it's really hard to take this game super seriously, as the storyline really wants you to do, and care for all these characters who I literally know nothing about, and it just felt really out of place with this super mature and gritty, you know, hellscape storyline interspliced with these one-ups you grab throughout combat and toys you pick up and, you know, the cartoony sound effects of the heads going off and stuff. You know what I mean? It just felt very out of place. Second off, I didn't really like the whole aspects they try to play up with the Doomslayer, like trying to make him something he's honestly not. They kept trying to paint him as this like bigger than God figure in the game, and it just didn't really flow well because he is a silent protagonist and it's pretty easy to self-insert yourself into the character, which is kind of the point of games like that, you know, with Chief and those types of first-person shooter characters, and it just didn't really click for me. I always see Doom Guy as just a space marine who gets wrapped up into taking out demons in hell, right? And that's always kind of the allure of him. You're just a normal everyday guy who happens to be putting in the work to, you know, reset the balance kind of thing, and here it just doesn't go for that route at all. It tries to like give him a whole origin story and stuff, and it just didn't make sense. You know, it just didn't really work for me. So if you do enjoy the codex entries and calls and you don't mind catching up on all that stuff in a game as fast-paced as Doom, you don't mind taking that break away from the action, then you might actually enjoy the storyline. You might have some fun with it. Me personally, I just didn't care for it at all, and I didn't really like what they were doing with the characters, so I was just kind of done with it. I rather just have fun shooting demons and clearing out these arenas, right? That's my forte. That's why I play Doom, and hopefully you guys can understand that. So with that only con out of the way, let's get into all of the beautiful pros. Doom Eternal is a very, very good fast-paced first-person shooter. Dare I say, probably one of the best first-person shooters we've had this generation of consoles, next to Titanfall 2 and, well, funnily enough, Doom 2016. This game just takes that Doom 2016 formula, you know, the base of it, and amps it up to 11, right? More enemy types along with all the returning old enemies from Doom 2016, different weapon variety, different weapon modifications, all of that stuff. Just keep enhancing the gameplay, adding on to it, and on top of that, just making sure things feel fresh and new. Doom Eternal's combat is very reminiscent of a character action game similar to things like Devil May Cry or my personal favorite third-person shooter, Vanquish. Now, there's a lot of aspects of the combat that appeal to this reasoning, but before I get fully into that, let me dial it back a little bit and talk about some of the new stuff we get. For starters, we get a brand new freeze grenade, which can freeze enemies in place, the flame belch mechanic, which lets you set enemies ablaze and get a bunch of armor from them as long as you pump them full of lead. Of course, we have the classic chainsaw, which you can't go wrong with, and of course, we got some new weapons and weapon modifications. For example, the super shotgun comes equipped with a hook shot now, which drags you directly towards enemies instead of pulling them closer towards you, which is absolutely the most Doom thing I can think of when I think of Doom. The heavy assault rifle comes equipped with a scope that turns into a high-powered sniper rifle, which is very effective at taking down enemies and breaking apart armor pieces to help you, you know, nullify some of their damage output. The plasma gun now shoots a microwave beam, etc, etc. You get the gist. Every weapon has a slight new design or a new mechanic or modification to change it up just enough so it doesn't feel exactly like the weapons we had in Doom 2016. Despite a lot of those weapons being recycled, thanks to the weapon modifications being such a fresh take on what we experienced with Doom 2016, they just feel brand new again, and I just couldn't get tired using them. The weapons here are just a ton of fun, especially some of the newer ones like the slower paced ballista, but basically the plasma version of the rocket launcher. All of these weapons do a really good job of working in tangent with each other, and thanks to the new rock paper scissors mechanic everything has, which is breaking off armor at the right times, flame belching at the right time to gain armor for yourself, using your chainsaw to get a bunch of ammunition back, and of course the infamous leaving fodder around so you could glory kill just to get enough health back to hopefully clutch out a tough encounter. All of it is just extremely rewarding, and nothing hits this nail more on the head than playing on those harder difficulties. This game is absolutely brutal. Like, Doom 2016 was tough, right? Like, it was hard, but adding in all these new factors with the breakable armor pieces, which makes these enemies go from pretty darn buffed to absolute cannon fodder at times, it really just shows how difficult the game can get. And throwing a bunch of those guys at you at once, where you have to skillfully precision aim at the right point just to take down a single armor piece, now all of a sudden the game turns into this typical fast-paced shooter where you're going from left and right and up and down and all around, taking down enemies left, pretty easily, and then it turns into this slow-paced kind of duel where you're trying to figure out which enemies you want to take out first. Oh, do I want to break off this guy's armor? Oh wait, there are arachnoids coming in. I know I got to get rid of that turret because I'm going to be flying a lot. It tracks pretty well. Oh, Revenant's on me. He's going to fire missiles. That kind of thing. It really puts you into a slight panic state, and I'm not going to lie, there are times where I just straight up forgot to breathe during encounters because it is just so much going on screen at once, and you just got to make sure you're firing off on all cylinders so you could clear the next room and move on. And nothing really shows this off more than the enemy variety. Now, there are a couple of returning enemies and of course some classic enemies. Everyone's got some different type of look to them. More breakable armor pieces, so you kind of see their chests come exposed, with the Baron of Hell showing off his fiery rib cage as you take them apart. And you have big people like the Tyrant, who just turned into flesh and bones by the end of their run with you. There's all sorts of different things like that, and all the breakable armor and things just makes it hit and makes all of your impacts with your guns just feel that much more punchy. However, none of them come close in terms of enemy variety to the Marauder type.
Entering main laboratory.
The Marauder enemy is by far my favorite enemy in the entire game. There's something really unique about this character because he basically slows the super fast-paced gameplay of Doom down to a crawl, or speeds it up exponentially depending on how you're taking him on or when you're taking him on. This character is really unique because he pulls up a invincible shield that you cannot penetrate and even will repel strong projectiles back at you, so you have to be on your toes at all times. If you shoot at him when it's up, you're going to be eating a lot of damage. If you shoot at him when he's in a close range, however, you're going to get blasted back with a shotgun. When you're at a farther range, he's going to swing his axe at you and you have to jump or dodge out of the way of an axe AoE attack. Now, the way you have to fight this guy is keeping him at this mid-range distance with you so you can blow him with the super shotgun, stagger him, and then pump him full of lead. Now, being able to constantly play this back and forth game of chess, if you will, against this character, which feels very Souls-like, by the way, with his movement and stuff, basically slows this game down exponentially, forcing you to play his game, his duel, and the way the story hypes him up is honestly one of the coolest moments in the game. He's a very satisfying enemy to take on, and I always looked forward to our encounters with him after I started learning his patterns and figuring it out. Like, it was honestly a duel of respect when he came on the screen, and I had a lot of fun taking him on. He's one of my favorite enemy types I've ever fought in any game, and I specifically started playing on the harder difficulties, which was Ultra Hell and Nightmare mode, just so I could encounter him more and more. And Enemies are just a ton of fun to take on in this game, and the arenas help that out exponentially. There's a lot of different mobile options you can take, whether you want to fly high in the air with monkey bars and stuff shown about, along with jump pads so you could constantly maneuver in the air and use runes and things like that to keep your air control that much better, whether it's hovering in the air for a short period of time or literally getting a rune to equip having better control in air. It's up to you, and it makes movement feel extremely fluid. Or you could play the grounded game, dashing in and out of cover and making sure you move around just rapidly enough where you still have a chance to take a short breath and breathe, but still encounter a bunch of enemies and keep it moving so you're constantly getting ammo and refueling all of your supplies so you don't end up biting the dust. All in all, utilizing both acrobatics and ground combat is essential to figuring out how to play the game, especially considering some enemies will completely shut you down in air. I'm looking at you, cocodemons. Those guys are absolutely frustrating. And you really have to understand what times you want to be up in the air, what times you want to be on the ground, and what type of movement you're going to use to take down the opposition, because these guys come at you in droves. It is by far one of the most entertaining spectacles I've ever played, and it honestly does feel very reminiscent of a character action game in terms of combat, especially again with enemies like the Marauder coming out to fight with you. I really enjoyed everything this game had to offer. The endless amount of enemy variety that came on screen, forcing you to constantly switch your weapons up and make sure you're not just sticking to one rocket launcher and heavy assault gun combo. Looking at you, Doom 2016, you know we all did it, but really forcing you to finally use everything in your inventory. And I constantly found myself running out of ammo and forgetting to use my chainsaw and things like that because it was just so much fun. And all the different equipment they throw in there to just help flesh things out, whether it be freezing enemies in large clusters with the freeze grenade, throwing a frag grenade once it's leveled up so you could get clusters of frag grenades blowing up all over the place, dashing in to get armor and all of that beautiful stuff. It just works out really well. And on top of that, the exploration and core presentation of each world is very good as well. You have your typical futuristic bases, which is, you know, the UAC type of locations, right? We go back to Mars a little bit, which is always nice. We get to visit, you know, the Doomslayer's kind of homeworld and see his origin and stuff, which is really cool. And the absolute amount of variety on display here, which infinitely beats just the Mars and Hell locations we saw in Doom 2016, are really fun. It's so cool to finally visit places like Earth and Doomslayer's homeworld and all this different kind of stuff, even like where these demon entities are kind of coming from and stuff, right? You know, other than Hell, their second place. I don't want to spoil anything, but if you know, you know. There's a lot of really interesting environments, and it's really cool to finally see all that stuff realized here. And it wouldn't mean much if the graphics weren't hitting, but they most definitely are. The graphics are very good. Textures just look absolutely incredible. The game never dipped frame rates too badly for me. I had a couple issues on Thursday because the patch wasn't out yet. The game came out the 20th and stuff, and once the patch came out, downloaded all those game drivers, everything was working pretty well, right? So didn't really have many issues on the PC front. It's an extremely good port, and the fact that I could run this game on high with the 1066 gig while recording it and it only taking up around 20 to 30% of my computer, very rare for these types of games, dude. Shout outs to Tech 7 and the whole team behind the engine and stuff. They did a beautiful job optimizing the game, and I think it worked out to this game's favor here. Overall, Doom Eternal, graphically speaking, is absolutely gorgeous. It's presented very well, and I especially love how the UI is surprisingly not that cluttered. It works out to its advantage, and things just are very concise and easy to read in the midst of combat. I really love how each gun is color-coded, and on top of that, each ammo piece is color-coded, so you always kind of know what type of stuff you're picking up, right? It's not just orange ammo or blue ammo or whatever. Every gun kind of has their own unique color type, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. The whole game is just laid out very well. Arenas are super satisfying to move around, even though little more frustrating ones where there's lava or purple goo that slows you down on the floor. It just kind of compels you to figure out a pathway to completely avoid those obstacles entirely, and once you get those down, it goes from being this frustrating thing where it's like, oh, why'd they put that into the game, into, oh, well, I see this game is forcing me how to learn aerial combat in this section, how to utilize it to the best of my ability, and how to keep my air momentum, perfect while, aiming at enemies on the floor and stuff. I just love how there's those small kind of bits of game design that help out. On top of that, exploring areas is pretty standard stuff here. It's usually just punching switches and looking, for cracked walls and breaking them open and sneaking your way through to pick up different keys and things like that to help further expand the overworld, kind of Metroidvania-esque, which is always nice. Very reminiscent of those 90s FPSs of old, your Quakes and id Tech games, right? So being able to find different secret purple keys to open gates to access these super secret battle arenas is really, really cool. And they always throw a bunch of enemies at you, so if you're not quite strong enough to take them on yet, you're not quite skilled enough, don't worry, you can always come back to them at a later time through replaying levels, which is what I've been doing, because some of those were definitely way too difficult for me at points, and I just felt like I had to take a break and come back to it when I'm a little bit stronger, a little bit wiser kind of thing, right? Or sometimes you just miss them altogether. It's a very convoluted map design here, but in a good way. There weren't any maps that I really didn't like. Everything just worked here, and places were pretty varied, and I never felt that one area was the same. Even the area that was literally part 1 and part 2. The game just really sticks out to me from a visual aspect, and I definitely enjoyed how exploration never felt too cryptic or confusing, right? Everything seemed pretty laid out as long as you take the time to look around you and figure out, what you should do to access the secret areas, get those collectibles, and move on with the game. Overall, from a single player perspective, Doom Eternal is a very good game. It's one of the best FPSs I've ever played. It's got tons of glorious combat. Combat arenas are infinite, tons of fun to, uncover and figure out for yourself, and often feels very puzzling at times, just trying to figure out which pathways are going to be the most efficient to taking enemies down while keeping yourself alive. All the different runes you can unlock, which is really cool to help buff up your character. Predator tokens you find do again buff up your character. All the weapon modifications and stuff just really help enhance the game, and it's basically taking all the stuff they learned from Doom 2016, amping it up to 11, and then adding in some more secret, stuff to the recipe to make it all that much better. Doom Eternal is just one of the coolest games I've played in quite some time, and it's definitely a contender for Game of the Year this year. I'm definitely pretty sure we're going to see it on a lot of lists, and you should keep your eye on this one. If you're a fan of first-person shooters, I really recommend you pick this up, and despite this game's difficulty curve being very high, don't worry, casual players, there's stuff for you too, and I'm very thankful that id Tech went out of their way to make this game just rewarding for hardcore players like myself, and pretty good for newcomers as well. There's a sentinel armor in the game that can help you basically keep up with them, right? You take in a lot more damage, you can dish out a lot more, that kind of stuff. There's an easy mode in the game, which is always nice and refreshing. It helps tone the difficulty down quite the bit, and of course there's even 1-up lives you can have, right? So you could get extra lives and instantly respawn in the heat of battle. So there's a lot of things here to help make the game that much easier for players that are just a bit more on the casual spectrum. And I'm very thankful for that, because that means people are going to be able to experience this super awesome game and eventually work their way up to the harder difficulties. Or if that's not their thing, that's okay too. Or maybe they're just in it for the story. I'm glad that id Tech just put stuff in there so players can ease themselves in. Accessibility is key, right? Ain't no shame in turning down the difficulty. The game even actively encourages you messing with difficulty sliders, and I'm glad that even Doom can have a heart of gold in that area. So overall, single player wise, Doom Eternal is absolutely incredible. I highly recommend you guys go and pick this game up. I don't really do number ratings. If I had to give it one, it'd be like a solid 9.5 out of 10, possibly even just a straight up 10. This game is just great. With the story stuff, it's just a 9 out of 10, but I could skip cutscenes, so I don't care. But it's tons of fun. Now, thank you all for watching the video. If you guys enjoyed, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe down below. I very much enjoyed this game, and I really am curious to see what your guys' thoughts are on Doom Eternal, so let's all have a conversation down below. And of course, stay tuned, because I will be covering Doom Eternal's multiplayer and the demon invasion mode and stuff that'll be added to the campaign in the future. I really want to talk about the multiplayer aspect of that stuff, so we'll have to see about that later. But the only way you can keep up with that is staying locked in and subscribed, so hopefully I'll see you guys around. Thank you all again for watching. Have a wonderful day, and peace.